Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Rohit Seth, I'm the Director of Marketing here at Adaptiiv Medical Technologies, and we are pleased to be offering a product feature series webinar today on improved hotspots in our 3D Bolus software for modulated electron radiation therapy. We have a special presenter today who I'll introduce a little later from our team here at Adaptiiv, one of our medical physics specialists, who is going to walk you through and take you through the modulated electron bolus module in our software and how it can, drastically improve and reduce hotspots for radiotherapy. Before we go, just note that this webinar is highly specialized, and it's for those folks who are using electron radiotherapy in their practice today. So we do apologize if we go a little deep into the weeds here, but I think that's the intention of this, and we really want to convey the great things that our software can do and help in your treatment plans. Before we go too far in and let our specialist speak, I'm just going to give a brief overview for those that don't know about Adaptiiv and what our 3D printing software solution does. Take a look at traditional approaches to electron therapy, radiotherapy, and our solution, the modulated electron bolus that we offer in our software, and then we'll get right into the details of today's product feature. So as I mentioned, Adaptiiv is a medical software company that has an advanced 3D printing software solution that's used in radiotherapy, radiation oncology. Our software does have a uniform thickness bolus module, which is used in photon radiotherapy, our modulated electron bolus module, which we're going to talk about today, in electron treatment, and as well as a high dose rate surface brachytherapy module that creates applicators for use in brachytherapy. The biggest advantage, and thing that we are most proud about is our offering of personalized medicine in healthcare today. So our software uses patient-specific data from a CT scan to create medical accessories for use in radiation therapy. We are a regulated solution, the only one of its kind in the market. Last July in 2018, we received US FDA clearance, 510K clearance, to market a 3D printing software solution for use in radiation oncology. And we're the world's first company to have that designation, so we're very proud about that. Also regulated in Australia and in all over Europe with our CE mark, as well as ISO certification. So a lot of, and we kind of try to take as much of the legwork out of it as possible for you, the end user. And we spent well over 3,000 hours validating a 3D printer, or we're closing in on 4,000 hours now on that printer. It's produced by a company named Airwolf 3D out of California. It's called the Axiom 20. You'll see it on the side there on an image. And we spent a lot of time validating that for use with our software, as well as filament materials such as PLA and TPU, which can be used with the printer to produce these medical accessories. Just a brief note on our global distribution. So we're in 9 countries now, with Mexico being recently added as our latest customer in Mexico. So very proud about that. In the last 2 years, we've expanded our reach significantly, and we're continuing to grow. We have leading centers all over the world that are using our software solution today clinically. So very proud of that. As I mentioned before, just a traditional approach to radiation therapy and bolus being used in photon electron therapy. Most of you will know, something like superflab or a flat piece of wax material is usually used to simulate, the tissue equivalency of skin to apply radiation to. Again, for those that have used, superflab or these traditional methods, it's really difficult to accommodate complex patient anatomy and curvatures in a patient's body. So, that results in air gaps and treatment that's not as ideal with a uniform dose distribution. So enter in our solution. We have the Adaptiiv 3D printing software solution. First and foremost, we wanted to really make it as easy as possible to integrate with existing workflows and TPSs that are used by you today. So we offer full and seamless integration of our software in with your existing workflows to make it as easy as possible. Borko will elaborate a little later on savings in time, in fabrication time, and how easy it is to create and design medical accessories with our software. And you eliminate the need for complex wax bolus or using, wet gauze, hot wet gauze to fill in air gaps that would be traditionally seen with the status quo option. We have some really cool features in our software, such as in vivo dosimetry, that you can print, create dosimeter pockets directly within an accessory or applicator, which is really valuable. It makes for easy measurement of dose. Post-processing tools, as mentioned there, you can cleave a bolus into two parts at any shape and angle. That's really beneficial when you're dealing with complex curves, like such as a scalp or a big part of the body, like an arm or a leg, where you can cut a bolus or applicator into two and then fuse them back together quite simply and smoothly. Some other features such as cropping and smoothing, patient ID label are featured in our software. Easy point and click features. Since the applicators or accessories are patient specific, they can be used throughout the course of treatment if the patient anatomy doesn't change. So having something like a patient ID label is really great to have on there, so you can go back and say, okay, it was used for this patient. You can reuse it in further courses of the treatment. One thing in our MEB, our modulated electron bolus module, which again Borko will elaborate on today, is lowering the presence of hotspot. So this whole webinar is going to be dedicated to that and how we can do that, provide a homogeneous dose distribution and improve dose conformity. Above all, the sparing of healthy tissues or organs at risk is something that our software allows for in such an easy and efficient way. And we'll see that throughout the course of today's feature. Again, in the end, the patient is of utmost importance to us, and I know they are to you. So we really strive to provide the highest standard of patient care, and using our software solution really improves patient care and comfort and the overall patient experience when they're going through radiation therapy. So again, you'll see that as we go through today's webinar and the ways that can be done. Just a couple videos here to show our MEB module, which I've talked about. You can see the top video there shows your traditional status quo sheet bolus, and you have these overexposed doses of radiation being applied to healthy tissue. Our adaptive bolus, which is created through our MEB module, really improves the sparing of healthy tissues, and that bolus modulated fluence is just applied directly to the PTB. So it's really beneficial when you're using electron radiotherapy. Another visual example here, you can see, and Borko will elaborate on this, our modulated bolus can improve the dose wash, which you see on the right there. The dose is hitting healthy tissue and organs at risk underneath, in this case, a brain, where our 3D bolus module alleviates that and prevents radiation to those underlying tissues. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our presenter today. His name is Borko Basaric. He's a medical physics specialist here at Adaptiiv. He's been with us for just over a year now, and I won't do him any injustice, so I'll let him introduce himself and take you through today's webinar.
Okay, hello to everybody. As Rohit introduced me, my name is Borko Basaric, and I'm a medical physicist specialist at Adaptiiv. I've been working in Adaptiiv for just over a year now, but overall 10 plus years of clinical experience in radiation therapy and medical physics. For the most of that time, I worked in Serbia as a certified senior medical physics specialist at the Oncology Institute of Vojvodina. And then when I moved to Canada, I basically worked briefly for a half a year in Credit Valley Hospital in Greater Toronto area. And basically from that point, I refreshed my career and basically transferred into the industry. And as I said, it's almost, well, yeah, it's 1 year here in Adaptiiv. So today in this webinar, I will be talking about the new hotspot correction algorithm that's connected to modulation electron radiation therapy and our MEB, so modulated electron bolus module that's been developed in our software. And this topic has been presented at ASTRO conference in Milan this year, and it is available upon request. So when we talk about electron treatments, basically we use them for superficial radiation therapy treatments because there is capacity to spare normal tissue that lie distal to the PTV. Basically, in traditional electron plans, we'll know that we get to choose the electron energy, which basically depends on the depth of the tumor site. We get to choose the aperture, the size, and basically the shape of the aperture, which can conform the dose, but only in the XY plane. And of course, we use a uniform thickness bolus to basically transpose the dose up and shift the dose to the surface of the patient. Most of the TPS, commercial TPSs nowadays have a Monte Carlo dose calculation algorithm built. And basically, this wraps up the traditional method of electron RT treatment plans. The ultimate question here is what happens to the dose conformity distal to the PTV. So that's exactly where our MEB module comes in, where basically we developed an algorithm which transforms or transposes the distance between the distal part of the PTV and the 90% dose or the prescribed dose, which is designated here as T1 to T2. So it transposes that distance into the shift of the bolus thickness. So we are basically modulating the surface thickness of the bolus, and it's being done using the something that we call a coefficient of equivalent thickness, and basically this is the product that we accomplish. We actually modulate the surface of the bolus, taking into account the shape of the PTV and the shape of the prescribed dose. And the ultimate outcome is that we can completely conform the prescribed dose to the shape of the PTV in electron radiation therapy. What we actually use in our software is DICOM structures or DICOM files, such as DICOM RT structures, DICOM CT images, and DICOM RT plan. From the structures, we use the simple bolus structure, the PTV structure, and the dose 90 or prescribed dose structure, which is being used in our ray tracing algorithm to modulate the surface of the bolus. Of course, we use DICOM CT images and DICOM RT plan to extract some of the data that we need for this modulation to happen. So I think this is the perfect representation of what the MEB module is doing in our software. As I said, it modulates the surface of the bolus in such a way that it reflects the shape of the PTV, but at the same time, it reflects the shape of the initial prescribed isodose. Here in magenta color, you can see the prescribed isodose that has been calculated with the simple bolus used. And on contrary, in the blue dose color wash, you can see the dose that has been calculated using our MEB, so modulated electron bolus. Of course, you can see the difference in dose conformity, at least qualitatively here on this slide, between simple bolus module and the electron bolus. And anybody can basically imagine that this excessive dose coming from the simple bolus can easily affect any underlying organs at risk, distal to PTV, of course. So our MEB module can be used with the point-based normalization or volume-based optimization that's been embedded in your clinically commissioned TPS. And of course, dose conformity is fully accomplished with our MEB module. So this conformity is, might I say, just the half the equation of the our module and what it does. The second part, or the second iteration of our module, basically addresses the dose homogeneity. So after the first modulation, and after we actually modulate the surface of the bolus, accounting for the shape of the PTV and shape of the initial prescribed dose, basically the added bolus material is creating an additional material where additional scattering of the electron beam can occur. So this additional scattering may focus in regions that are just beneath the valley between the adjacent peaks of the modulated bolus, and may create a hotspot region inside the PTV. So our hotspot correction algorithm that's built in our MEB module basically accounts for not just for those conformity, but for those homogeneity as well. So for a certain patient electron RT treatment plan, so we can choose beam energy, the aperture, size and shape, bolus material as well, in terms of different REDs that are used, especially if you're using 3D printed boluses where you can actually slightly change the type of material. And the optimization parameters in calculations are, all these features are basically all predetermined in electron plans. So if after first iteration of MEB module, you actually get a hotspot region in the PTV, so these features, as I said, are all predetermined and cannot account for further alleviation of the hotspot. But so the question is how to address those homogeneity, and our answer, which we actually presented through our hotspot correction algorithm, can further modulate the shape of the bolus. So we can go to the iteration number 2, and we can change the peak to value ratio of the modulated bolus surface. Here is the diagram how our hotspot correction algorithm actually works. So there are essentially short steps. The first step is that the user has to choose what is our hotspot, and the user will choose the hotspot inside the TPS so that the dose will be transferred into the basically the RT structure. So we will choose, let's say, 107% or 110 or 115, whichever percentage or whichever dose you actually consider the hotspot. So these RT structures, so hotspots, which are, as I said, those converted into RT structures, the RT structure of the PTV, and the already modulated bolus from the first iteration will be all used in our hotspot correction algorithm, so that the hotspot correction algorithm will actually create a hotspot margin around the hotspot, and it will create sort of a topographical map of the modulated bolus. So if the base of the peaks, which are near the hotspot, intersect the hotspot margin, these peaks, as designated on the diagram as 1 and 2, will be counted in the hotspot correction algorithm. But if the base of the peak, which is designated as 3 in the dotted blue line, does not intersect the hotspot margin, which is also user selectable, then the peak designated as number 3 will not undergo any further modulation. So to wrap up this hotspot correction algorithm, only the peaks or the bases of the peaks that actually do intersect the hotspot margin will undergo further scaling. So this is just a workflow how our software integrates with the TPS. So I must say first that 3D Bolus software is not a treatment planning system. So we can account for modulation of the bolus surface, and we can produce STL files, which will ultimately be 3D printed. But there is no underlying dose calculation in our software at the moment. So any dose calculations have to be performed in your clinically commissioned TPS. And as I said, this is a diagram of how 3D Bolus interacts with your TPS. The first step is initial dose calculation of the electron plan using a simple bolus. Then by transferring RT, DICOM CT images, RT structs, and DICOM RT plan into 3D Bolus, into our software, we perform the first iteration, which is modulated electron bolus optimization. When the optimization is done, well, in the matter of, well, let's say a few seconds, then the structure, the modulated bolus structure, is being exported back to the TPS for dose calculation. When the dose calculation is being performed, there are certainly two paths by which you can go. The first thing is if you are satisfied with the dose calculation, or let's say if you do not have any hotspots, then basically your plan is done, and you can export the STL file from the MEB module, 3D printed, and basically go to the function. If the dose with Bolus does give you any hotspots, then we again transfer some RT structs back to the hotspot correction algorithm, or back to our MEB module, and we perform hotspot correction optimization, which is the second iteration of our MEB module. So as you can see here, the workflow is that there is some going on like back and forth between TPS and our software, and at the moment this is the workflow, but hopefully our MEB module together with the hotspot correction algorithm will be hopefully accounted for in any of the future commercial treatment planning systems. So this is how our module, MEB module looks like. As I said, it looks like a TPS, but it is not a TPS, as it does not perform any dose calculations. But it is very easy to use, and the menu goes from top to down. You get to choose different RT structs that account for PTV, bolus, and in this case, the hotspot that you actually chose in your TPS. And as you see here, the optimization, basically, it's a ray tracing optimization that further modulates the shape of the already modulated surface of the bolus by actually scaling or reducing the peaks, or basically scaling the peak to valley ratio to a different user selectable value. So when we go back, ultimately, when we go back to the TPS, this is what we get. But as I said, sometimes, because we're adding the bolus material, sometimes hotspots can occur inside the PTV after our first modulation. But as I said, our hotspot correction algorithm further modulates the shape of the bolus and basically alleviates hotspots. So we can see here that in the first, on the right-hand side, you can see the original MEB, so original modulated electron bolus, which produced well, pretty high hotspots, around 130% of the prescribed dose. But our second iteration of the MEB actually alleviated those hotspots, bringing them down to around 108. Basically that's something that's very close to the or I would say that is a clinically acceptable level concerning the electron RT treatment modality. And as you see qualitatively here, the conformity of the prescribed dose is fully maintained, while at the same time bringing the maximum dose to PTV down to a clinically acceptable level. And that's the ultimate value that has been added in our MEB, that we can basically account both for dose conformity and dose homogeneity to the PTV in electron RT treatment plans. So this is just a dose profile comparison between the original MEB, which is the red profile, and the hotspot corrected MEB, which is the blue profile. And it can easily be seen that the maximum dose can be brought down drastically between the original MEB, so the first iteration of our module, and the second iteration, which is the blue one. So let us inspect some of the numbers behind the hotspot correction algorithm. So we have some columns here. The first column represents peak to value ratio, or well, let's say the percentage of reduction of peaks of the modulated electron bolus. So 100% represents the uncorrected MEB, or our first iteration, while 80, 60, 40, and 20, and 0% all represent basically different peak to value ratios in the second iteration, or the hotspot correction algorithm. And just for comparison, we have some numbers behind the simple bolus plan coming from the TPS. So the main point from this table and the takeaway message is that with the hotspot correction algorithm and different peak to value ratios, we can bring down the hotspot to the clinical acceptable level. So there is at least one peak to value ratio that can be used in our hotspot correction algorithm that can bring down the hotspot to the clinically acceptable level, while at the same time maintaining the minimum and mean dose to the PTV, which is clinically acceptable. But I think the biggest value added here is that account for dose conformity, which is comparable to the modulated electron bolus, and dose homogeneity, which is comparable to the simple bolus. So basically, with our hotspot correction algorithm, we take the best of both worlds. So we take the conformity that's been actually accomplished within the MEB, and we take the homogeneity, which is very comparable to the homogeneity of the simple bolus. We performed some testing in the meantime on phantom cases and on cases, and all this testing has been actually shown in our Astro poster. Basically, all of these cases show that we can bring the dose down to a clinically acceptable level, while at the same time maintaining the dose conformity very much improved in respect to the traditional electron RT planning. Let's now inspect all these 6 cases that we have done for the hotspot correction algorithm. We see that if we see the simple bolus plans in these 6 cases, we see that the conformity index for simple bolus plans is just, well, it's poor. But when we employ our modulated electron bolus algorithm, we see, and that's the dark blue column, we see that the conformity index gets much improved in respect to the simple bolus, which is the gray column. But the ultimate result is that if we look at the hotspot corrected MEB, which is the middle column, the light blue one, we see that the conformity index is maintained comparable to the original MEB or the first iteration. So we see that the first and the second iteration of the MEB algorithm basically maintains the good conformity of the prescribed dose to the PTV. But what happens to the maximum dose to the PTV? After the first iteration or after the first modulation, we see that by adding additional bolus material, the hotspots tend to rise inside the PTV. And that's the first dark blue column. We see that in respect to the initial simple bolus plan, the maximum dose to PTV gets much higher after the first iteration in these 6 cases. But by using our hotspot correction algorithm, which is iteration number 2 in our software, that we can alleviate those hotspots and we can bring them down to the clinically level. But not only that, while doing that, we can at the same time maintain dose conformity, and I would say for the first time now we can account for both dose conformity and dose homogeneity to the PTV with by using electron RT treatment plans. And we see here that in all 6 cases we can actually maintain the dose homogeneity index very much comparable to the simple bolus plans, while at the same time maintaining the dose conformity index comparable to the MEB plans. So to conclude, our MEB algorithm, MEB module can account for dose conformity of the prescribed dose in electron plans, but at the same time, with our hotspot correction algorithm or our second iteration in our MEB module, we can account for dose homogeneity. And not only that, we can actually choose optimal balance between dose and dose homogeneity inside electron RT treatment plans. An additional thing to add is we had some feedback from the US hospitals which actually tried manually to modulate the bolus by actually drawing a bolus contour slice by slice, which basically took them anywhere around 20 to 40 hours of manual work on the TPS. Our design and fabrication time is reduced to So our design time is reduced to a few minutes in respect to manual labor, which can take dozens of hours. So I would say this is the second biggest value added to our software, is that the fabrication time of modulated electron bolus is much more reduced to any manual design and fabrication you can imagine. So to wrap the things up, moving forward, our next goal is to automate MEB and hotspot correction algorithms and basically go towards inverse electron RT planning, where users will be able to choose their dose conformity and dose homogeneity and a maximum dose to a plan, and let our future MEB module actually calculate automatically the modulation of the bolus, which will basically modulate the electron beam and give you the desired dose to the patient. And yes, let's wrap things up. These are some references which you can use, and of course a novel hotspot correction algorithm in MERT is available as a poster upon request, of course. And of course, you can email me if you're having some questions about the modulated electron bolus. And of course, we are now open for any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Borko. That was quite the presentation. Really got in depth there and really insightful work that you and the team here at Adaptiiv have done with respect to the hotspot correction and the MEB module overall. So really great work. Thanks for sharing the background that went into this really amazing research. And yeah, we are open for questions, as you mentioned. We do have one in so far. So if anyone out there has any questions, please type them in the chat bar, and we'll definitely get to it. If you can't think of any now and have some later, you can email Borko or marketing@adaptiiv.com, and we can answer them after the fact. So first question is from Richard at Cablon. Hi, Richard. Thank you for attending the webinar. Pleased to have you, and as well as everyone else. So Richard's question is, can the Adaptiiv software be used with other 3D printers? In Holland, where Cablon is based, there are some Ultimakers and DDD drop printers, which are different brands. So I mean, that's the first question. Can our software be used with other printers? And then is all the PLA CE marked and ISO certified? So Borko.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for the question. And the the easy answer is yes. Adaptiiv software can be used with any printer, as you would be producing STL files with our software. So STL files can go to any commercial 3D printer of your choice. And for the PLA, yeah, we're dealing only with standard PLA, right? So it is CE certified and ISO, yes, it is. So that's basically the answer to this question.
Yeah, the PLA that we verified, the standard PLA is made by 3D Fuel, the company that we can distribute to anyone using our software. That being said, other types of PLA can be used. We just haven't done the verification on our end and validation that went into our regulatory clearance and approval. That's the only difference. But other materials such as TPU, thermoplastic, polyurethane can be used. There's a multiple filaments that are able to be used with our software.
Yeah, ultimately, this is, so the choice of the filament is also the choice of your professionals working in the hospital, medical physicists, dosimetrists. You can change your choice of material, but you would need to characterize the density, relative electron density, and physical density, homogeneity of the sample. So basically, you would need to validate clinically any filament you would want to use. And also, it depends on different regulations. If regulations of your country permit one material, forbid another, or anything similar, then that should be your guideline for choosing the filament. PLA is just the standard filament in use nowadays in 3D printing, in radiation therapy, but there are also some more flexible filaments as well. So,
yeah, thank you again, Richard, for your question. No other questions are coming in. I do have one for Borko that might benefit the rest of the folks. So in your last slide, Borko, you mentioned next steps and moving forward. I wonder if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on what that would look like. Yeah, and
yes, of course,
and
yeah.
how what
yeah.
people could expect.
Yeah.
You know.
So at the moment, our modulated electron bolus and hotspot correction algorithms are basically done in 2 iterations. First, there is MEB, which accounts for dose conformity, and then comes hotspot correction if needed for alleviating the hotspots. So moving forward, we want to automate both of these algorithms, maybe introduce some underlying dose calculation, which will help us basically automate the choice of your hotspot corrected modulated bolus. So we want to automate the MEB and hotspot correction algorithms so that basically we want to go close to inverse electron RT planning, where a user would select upfront, would select a hotspot they would like to alleviate. They would maybe parameter involving dose homogeneity and dose conformity, so the algorithm could actually calculate, let's say, the perfect shape of the bolus that will give you those results. So that would be kind of basically inverse electron RT planning, and we are working on it as we speak.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Still no questions. So again, after the fact, we can always take your questions after this presentation's over. We will be sending a recording of today's webinar to all of you. Oh, sorry, we got one question in here from Troy. All right, let's get to it. So Troy is asking, oh, sorry, one before that, Zach Morelli. Thanks for your question, Zach. So Zach's asking if the hotspot correction algorithm works by decreasing the height difference between peaks and valleys in order to decrease the hotspot dose. Borko, yeah.
Yes, so what our hotspot correction algorithm is doing exactly, it's actually reducing the peaks. It doesn't touch the valleys. So that's kind of the, I would say, like a secret ingredient. I mean, it's not secret. It's but it's I would say the part of the algorithm that we searched for some time, because we tried several things before that, but the best results would come if we only reduce the peaks and don't touch the valleys. So peak to valley ratio basically accounts for reducing just the peaks. And I explained how we find the peaks in our algorithm. They would have to intersect the peak search margin around the hotspot, because not every peak will will bring or will give you a hotspot. Of course, the most usual way of actually getting a hotspot in the treatment plan is when you have adjacent peaks and the valley in between. So the excessive scattering of electrons from the peaks will most likely focus around just beneath the valley and make a hotspot. So in our clinical user experience, that is the most likely case when your hotspots will be produced. But then by using our hotspot algorithm and by reducing the peaks, the amount of electron scatter that focuses on the hotspot gets less and less, and basically that is how our hotspot works. So if you have chosen electron energy that may not be suitable for that depth, or if you have pushed your, let's say, volume-based optimization too far, then our hotspot algorithm may not be able to help you. But if the hotspots come primarily due to additional bolus material that comes in form of the surface modulation, then our hotspot algorithm is very much useful.
Great, thanks Borko, and thanks Zach for your question. Appreciate that. Next question is from Diego. Diego's looking to know what materials used to make the bolus, and is the adaptive software only for electron treatment?
So hi Diego. So we're using basically plastic materials, which are at this moment PLA and Cheetah. So these are the filaments or 3D printing materials that have been validated with the adaptive. Of course, there are other filaments, many more. But as I said previously, if you want to use any type of new material or any type of material for 3D printing in radiation therapy, you would need to characterize and validate that filament in terms of its homogeneity, in terms of its density, physical and relative electron density, because you would need that in your TPS when performing calculation. You would need to put what is the RED of your filament in order to perform the calculation. So as I said, many filaments, but PLA and Cheetah are the ones we actually offer and the ones we validated.
Yeah, and Cheetah being TPU, thermoplastic polyurethane.
Yes. And for the electron, so the answer is that modulated electron bolus is only one of the modules we have in our software. The other modules are simple bolus module and surface brachytherapy module. So just briefly, simple bolus module takes into account, takes your bolus that's been created in the TPS and gives you, as the outcome, gives you an STL file which can be printed and 3D printed and put on a patient. Of course, the benefits of this module is that it provides a patient-specific structure or patient-specific device, which minimizes any air gaps between the bolus and the patient, which, as you may know, can cause underdosage to the PTV. So the patient-specific side of it is, I would say, the first added value to the simple bolus module. And secondly, we have some nice post-processing features where you can actually put a dosimeter hole inside the bolus. You can cleave the bolus in half. You can put a patient label on the bolus. At the moment, we are developing crosshairs that you can put on bolus. So all these post-processing tools are either available or are in development at the moment. And at the end, we have a brachytherapy module where we actually design a surface brachytherapy applicator, and we're designing catheter tunnels that are offset with a constant standoff and with a constant intertrajectory distance on a curved surface of the patient. So we're actually 3D printing the superficial brachytherapy applicator. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the question, Diego. Next one from Karen. Hey, Karen, thanks for joining us. Is there any limitation with the field size that could affect the homogeneity or conformal index? Borko, I'll leave that one to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with the, well, I would say with the increasing the field size, of course, the scatter will be increasing. At the moment, I don't have any data that show that. We haven't performed any investigations on that part, but I would say that the biggest obstacle to and the biggest limitation in this sense is maybe not the field size, but the modulation of the bolus. So if the modulation of the bolus gets if you add, so if the modulation of the bolus is designed in such way that it adds much material on the bolus, so in that case, optimizing the dose can produce like hotspots that are like way up and not clinically acceptable. So I would say that this scattering component coming from an excessive bolus material that comes from the first iteration from our module can be a limiting factor to it. But as I said, it all depends upon if you're using the energy that is suited for the depth of the bolus of the PTV you're treating, if you are using the appropriate aperture, and of course, optimization parameters. So I don't know if the optimization you're using is volume-based or point-based, but basically, if you're not pushing too much dose into the PTV by further modulating the bolus with our hotspot correction, you will be able to reduce the hotspots. But if you're pushing the dose, for example, if you have a volume-based optimization, if you're pushing more than 90% of the dose to 99% of the volume, if you want to push, for example, 100% dose, then I would expect that all the PTV would be in hotspots or something like that. I guess this answer would help.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for that answer. Shaq is asking a question. What is the experience of the patients with these kind of boluses? I don't know if we have a great answer, but yeah.
Yeah. So okay, we actually do have an answer for that one. If experiences of the patient. So the thing is that so may I mention NSHA? Sure. Yeah. Okay. So our collaborating partner across the road is NSHA, Nova Scotia Health Authority in Halifax, and their cancer center. So they have been using 3D printed boluses for some time, and in terms of patient experience, so the bolus is in terms of the material, the bolus material is sufficiently smooth, so not to cause I would say any damage to the skin of the patient. So like the patient experience, I would say is overall a positive. On the other hand, minimizing the air gaps between the bolus and the patient is something that's that aids in actually delivering the right amount of prescribed dose to the patient. So I would say there are multiple advantages when using the 3D printed boluses. And of course, you can use different materials. You can even use silicon boluses that are made of 3D printed shells, which we are developing at the moment. So I would say that it is decision maybe of a dosimetrist or radiation oncologist of which material is to be used in terms of 3D printing.
Yeah, and I would add on to that in terms of patient care and the comfort throughout the process. So the materials that Borko's mentioning, such as silicone or even TPU, is softer and smoother to the touch. So it's much more comfortable during treatment for the patient and less onerous, and invasive, I should say, when dealing with the status quo or traditional method of superflab or, hot wax or wet gauze being kind of put into areas to decrease or reduce these air gaps that our software already does in an automated way. Anyone out there who is delivering treatment in our radiation therapy knows that manually fabricating or filling in these air gaps manually for the patient is not the most pleasant experience, and you have to redo that each time. Whereas in our software, it can be done automated, and measurements and precise dimensions to the patient anatomy that conform much better. So we're nearing the end of time. We're going to wrap up with one last question here. This one's from Kareem. He has a question about how robust the dosimetry would be with respect to our software in regards to positioning the bolus versus the beam versus the PTV. He's asking, did you simulate or measure a shift in the bolus positioning and the effect on hotspots or coverage? That's a good question. That's a great question.
So at the moment, we don't have this kind of investigation under our belt, but I can speak a little about it and what I personally think about it. So about the positioning, at the moment, we are developing the surface crosshair that will be finely printed on the outer surface of the bolus, so you can actually position your patient and position the bolus on your patient and position, of course, the patient in respect to the linac and the reticule. Of course, inter-treatment movement can be monitored, of course, for any displacement, I would say. But for example, a CBCT would be, I would say, like an ideal tool to actually check that. But ultimately, the piece of information that we actually have and the investigations that we actually have is that by measuring the air gaps fraction by fraction, it's found that they are much more reduced in respect to the same method, but using a superflab standard sheet. So, and we have, we can share a paper on that. It's Dr. James Rober from the NSHA, yeah, so we can share that paper for you to see.
We'll send a link to that paper out with the webinar recording.
Yeah,
to everyone. All right. Well, that wraps up our questions for today. I think we got to all of them, so great. Thank you again to everyone for attending. Really appreciate your participation throughout this webinar, and stay tuned for future webinars coming from us and likely Borko as well. We have a lot of product features in our software and our modules that we have great stories to tell and share about. So stay tuned. They'll be coming your way in the near future. I will make one shameless plug for anyone in Europe or around Ireland. We're in Dublin next Friday for a one-day workshop. It's free to register and attend. So anyone out there who's in or going to be in the Dublin area in Ireland, come check us out. Come say hello. We'll be at in partnership with St. Luke's Radiation Oncology Network at St. James's Hospital. If you are, you can email marketing@adaptiiv.com for more information, or go to our website at adaptiiv.com/Ireland to register. And with that, I will say goodbye and have a great day to everyone. Thank you again, and thanks to Borko.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.